Today, I want to invite you to observe something with me. Something that's been on my mind a lot lately. Something that's so ordinary, it's actually easy to overlook. When something feels difficult in our lives, it's natural for us to try to understand it. If something isn't working, we look for a solution. That's part of being human. But I've been wondering whether that same habit can quietly extend somewhere else, toward ourselves. Not just toward the situations we're facing, but toward the person experiencing them. This can happen surprisingly so easily, it's difficult to notice. An uncomfortable feeling appears, a difficult day, a period of uncertainty. Something isn't feeling quite right. And before long, attention begins turning inward. What does it say about me? What still needs work? What haven't I understood yet? Those questions can seem completely reasonable. In fact, they often sound responsible. They sound like someone who wants to understand themselves, someone who wants to grow. And again, I want to be very careful here. I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with reflecting on yourself. That's not what I'm pointing to. I'm interested in something far more subtle, the possibility that over time we begin relating to ourselves primarily through the lens of correction. Noticing what still needs fixing, what still needs improving, what still needs resolving. And once that becomes familiar, something interesting can happen. The distinction between having problems and becoming the problem can start to blur. It's a quiet shift. Most people don't consciously tell themselves, I'm the problem. But they may increasingly relate to themselves as though that's true. If a difficult feeling appears, there must be something about me that explains it. If I feel unsettled, there must be something I haven't corrected yet. If life still feels difficult, perhaps there's still more work to be done. I've been thinking about this a lot, this relationship, because it seems more common than we realize. And it's not because people lack intelligence or because they're doing something wrong, but because this understanding, this way of interpreting experience is very understandable, especially if ordinary unease has come to be understood as evidence that something about us still requires correction. Then the project naturally continues. Another insight, another habit, another framework, another attempt to become someone who finally no longer feels like a problem. But here's the question that keeps staying with me. What happens to your relationship with yourself when correction becomes the primary lens through which you see yourself? Because every lens highlights certain things. If you look at yourself through the lens of correction, what naturally comes into view? The unfinished parts, the uncertain parts, the uncomfortable parts, the places that still seem to require work. And over time, that can become a surprisingly stable way of meeting yourself. Not first as a person, but as a project that always seems to contain another improvement, another adjustment, another problem waiting to be solved. Again, I'm not suggesting that learning, growth, or change are mistakes. That's not the observation. The observation is that there's an important difference between improving aspects of your life and gradually experiencing yourself as something that fundamentally requires continual correction. Those aren't the same relationship. One asks, what can I learn? The other quietly asks, what's wrong with me now? I found myself wondering whether that difference deserves much more attention than it usually receives. Because if the relationship goes unnoticed, then the project can continue indefinitely. Not because you never improve, but because you keep returning to yourself as primarily as something to work on. And perhaps that's the deeper question. Not, how do I finally solve myself? But when did I start? to begin relating to myself as though I were the thing that needed solving. That's something I've been thinking about a lot, and it's something we'll definitely continue to explore together.